Hello and welcome to this edition of Age of Truth TV. I'm Lucas Alexander in Hollywood, Los Angeles, California. Our special guest today is conspiracy researcher, lecturer, truth speaker, and founder of Project Camelot, KERRY CASSIDY. Thank you, KERRY CASSIDY. It's wonderful to see you, and it's great to be here, and thanks for being on our show. It's great to be back in Los Angeles.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm happy to do this.
Great. Briefly, let's do a little introduction to your work and how you began in this controversial field as a conspiracy researcher and revealing all of these dark hidden secrets, and also getting into interviewing these fascinating and intriguing people about what is or may be going on in the world behind closed doors.
Well, I was a frustrated filmmaker. I wanted to make sci-fi movies to reveal these same truths that I ended up revealing through interviewing people on documentary interviews in Camelot. And so I picked up a consumer-grade camcorder, and I had a small inheritance, and I basically started going to UFO conferences and interviewing people like myself all those years ago. And I've been doing this now for 12 years. And I was actually very interested in, and ended up to be surprised to find that I was quite good at interviewing people, and people seemed to like it. And eventually one of the first people I interviewed was Bill Ryan, who was representing the Serpo project, and he was a webmaster who had volunteered to put all the information regarding Serpo into a website, so people could search and read it and so on. And that was from a disclosure from what ended up to be a DIA disclosure, so Defense Intelligence Agency sponsored disclosure called Serpo. And it was about a human-alien exchange program. And it actually, you can see it at the end of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where you see Richard Dreyfuss getting dressed to go on a ship and the aliens coming off the ship. So that was actually based on a real piece of evidence.
Really?
And it does appear that we have had human-alien exchange programs. It is said since at least the 1960s. And that there may have been 3 or 4, or maybe we don't even know how many at this point. So Bill got involved with Serpo, and I decided that at the time he was simply a webmaster. He had, unbeknownst to me, been somebody who was a fan of investigating conspiracies, etc., for many years, and so he was also a good spokesperson for Serpo, and I decided to interview him. So I interviewed him at a conference that was happening in Vegas. I think it was actually Laughlin. The UFO Congress is what it was called. And that's where I first interviewed him. I interviewed Bill Hamilton, who's another Camelot witness, fascinating man, who has worked in actually black projects to some degree.
All right.
And I ended up creating a small documentary at that time, and they were part of it. And that was the early beginnings of Project Camelot, what became Project Camelot. And then Bill and I kept in a correspondence. I ended up going to Egypt with that part of my inheritance. And I went with Jordan Maxwell and William Henry because they were searching for signs of Atlantis in Egypt. And so I wanted to investigate that. Again, this is before Camelot.
Right.
And at that time, I often tell people that I actually interviewed Jordan Maxwell and found out about his experience with aliens at a time when he told me, even though I interviewed him on camera, that I couldn't release it because he didn't want people to know that he was having experiences in that area. He was known as a person who was very knowledgeable about secret societies and the occult and all of that. But at that time, this is many years ago, talking about aliens could really put you on the fringe. So he didn't want to reveal that then. Now I've done a major interview with him in which he reveals all of that.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so that was all those years later. So that was the early days of Camelot. As I say, I worked in Hollywood for 20 years prior
What
to that.
did you do exactly in Hollywood?
I started out as what you call a reader and an executive assistant to top executives. So I read screenplays and I would recommend them to be made into movies.
Right.
And I worked for HBO,
Okay.
Premiere Film Division, and those were small films that were being made for television for HBO at the time. And I was a reader for ICM, one of the major talent agencies, CAA, and
CAA.
yeah, Creative Artists Agency, not
Right.
not CIA.
No.
And I also, I worked for a lot of companies at that point. And then I eventually, before Camelot, became what you call an independent producer and tried to get packaged films, independent films, made. And I got some of my projects to people like the people who handle development for Ridley Scott, Steven Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy, and James Cameron, and others. And I basically hit a brick wall because I didn't have, I wasn't part of the Old Boys Network, and I couldn't get my movies off the ground, even though I know that they were excellent projects. I had projects like what is called Wingmakers, and Wingmakers has since, is a cult website. It's very well known, called wingmakers.com. And it's a multimedia website that talks about a black project scientist. And I became fascinated by that story. There's a book that is called The Ancient Arrow Project, and I would shop that around Hollywood. And basically, I reached a kind of a glass ceiling in those days. And
They didn't want to have anything to do with it, or they didn't want to make it, or
I didn't know the right people. Wasn't able to get actors attached, because if you don't make a name for yourself in Hollywood, working on lower level jobs, unless you really get in with the so-called network there, it's very difficult to get movies made because you need to have a name actor attached. You need a name director, etc. So I know that, for example, Steven Spielberg had looked at Wingmakers and that story and was interested in it many years ago, even before I brought it to him, in fact. But I became the representative of that project and did pitch it there to, again, Kathleen Kennedy. And it was rejected at the time by her. And so I got rejections for my projects. One of the people I had a project with was called Dan Sherman, who became a Camelot witness. And there's a story he wrote called Above Black. And eventually I interviewed him and revealed that story. I met a filmmaker that was working with him. I tried to shop that project. It's an excellent project. Even today, it would be fascinating for people, but was unable to get that project off the ground, and so on. So that was my early days back in Hollywood, and that's when I eventually picked up a consumer-grade camcorder and decided to go make a UFO documentary. And that's how I met Bill Ryan. And
so rejection in Hollywood actually made you a little bit brave, and you
Yes.
said, "Oh, I'm going to do my own thing."
Exactly. And so I decided, to do it on my own. And it was a good time to do that because filmmaking and filmmakers and digital filmmaking was just hitting the fore back then. And this was 2005. And so the equipment was there. I taught myself editing and so on and so forth, and basically started doing interviews and trying to put my documentary together. Then when I interviewed Bill Ryan, we decided to put our two skill sets together because he was a writer and a webmaster. And I had written screenplays as well and tried to shop my own screenplays in Hollywood. So I was a writer and filmmaker. And we basically decided that we wanted to get the truth out about the sector. And I had done a tremendous amount of research.
Which you would not have done if you had been hit the big time.
If at some point in the early days, yes, if I had hit the big time. Although I always, we were talking earlier, when I saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind when I was quite young, I decided that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to bring the truth out through movies. And I still believe this to this day, that the best way to get the truth out is through fiction. And it's also a lot safer than the road I chose in Camelot, because if you are saying it's fiction, you can kind of hide behind that and they will be less likely to want to target you than if you try to do it the way I've done it, which is as an investigative reporter, documentary filmmaker, which is actually what I am at this point.
Mm-hmm. Of all of those many incredible interviews you've done for those 12 years and all those incredible people you've met, are there any specific ones that you can select or you can say, oh, those ones were the most memorable?
That's always a hard question. I can say, yes, I can obviously tell you Henry Deacon is one of, he came out under his real name, Arthur Neumann. He was a scientist that worked in black projects, and he was what you call cross-disciplinary. So he tended to, instead of what a lot of scientists who specialize, they tend to work in their own little specialized area and they don't know the bigger picture. In his case, he actually was cross-disciplinary, so he tended to have a lot of knowledge of what was really going on in the secret space program. He was one of our first witnesses, actually, in the early days of Camelot, and we got a tremendous amount of information from him. But interestingly, he was using a false name, Henry Deacon, which we gave him because he wanted to have hide his name at that time.
Did you see his face?
No, he wouldn't. He never did a video interview at that time.
All right.
Later, he actually spoke at one of my conferences, and you can watch that footage on my Vimeo channel, which it's excellent, footage. But no, in the early days, he wasn't out under his own name, so he was only. In fact, he wouldn't allow us to tape record the actual conversations, so we had to remember, after we talked to him, everything that he said, and then we would write it up. And Bill did a lot of the writing at that time of the testimony.
Why would he even talk to you about these things? Well,
this gets into the psychology of whistleblowers and the fact that they're usually people that have been working for black projects, the secret space program, for sometimes 40 years, sometimes 30 years, 20 years, but usually quite a long time. And they end up being, they start to realize what they're part of. They start to realize that the human race is in the dark. And so they decide to make a sort of, it's a crisis of conscience, if you will.
Okay.
And they finally decide that they want to be a whistleblower, in essence. They don't, back in those days, when we first started, people didn't even know what the word whistleblower meant.
Right.
They thought it was purely in a corporate setting of some kind. But we started using the term, and it's now become very popular and very well known.
Like Edward Snowden, for example.
Snowden and Assange, both of those people were not out and around. And we were one of the first websites to ever do this kind of interview with what we call witnesses from above top secret. So Henry Deacon is one such person, Arthur Neumann. You asked me for the most important.
Exactly.
Pete Peterson is another person, worked for 40 years again for this Black Projects. He's something of a...
And can we just talk about Black Projects in order for people to know what that is specifically?
Black Projects are basically projects that are above top secret. So they're not talked about. They have a classification that makes them so that the general public on every level, and even people with secret, when I say above top secret, I'm talking you start at secret. So it's way above that. It's above top secret, and top secret is is actually a rather lower level, from what I understand, of the classifications, and it goes way up from there. As an independent writer, director, producer, when I went to film school, so I studied, and then I decided to, we decided to tour the world, interviewing witnesses from above Top Secret who would talk to us. And as it happened, we hit it at a time when the zeitgeist was ready for that kind of information, and YouTube was just in the early days. I'm a YouTube director from the original YouTube, so other people in the early days of YouTube would only be allowed to have, I think it was 10 or 20-minute segments.
10, I believe, as far as I remember.
And I was able to have 2-hour interviews because I was one of the founding YouTube directors.
Wow.
Because I had gone to film school and had the background. So that did assist Camelot in the early days.
Obviously.
Because we do, also this is the other thing we sort of pioneered in some ways, I would say, is a 2-hour interview that goes into depth. Instead of using sound bites, not just a half hour, not just, not what you see on CNN or whatever. So this was a very important part of our sort of procedure, I guess, our process. And we became very well known for that. It was very sort of avant-garde. It wasn't done in those days. And we would go into a person's home. I flew all over the world. And I was using, in the early days, I was using the money from my inheritance to fund Project Camelot. Then I ran out of money, and I made a bad investment. And so the money went even faster than it should have, and basically was down to nothing. And so we decided that we would start asking, because at that point we had an audience. So we started asking for donations.
Right.
And it was amazing because people started donating, and that really kept Camelot going. In fact, does to this day, and it's 12 years later. And I can say that the first year that we were in operation, we interviewed, 20 or more very important interviews that to this day are more or less classics. That is the kind of thing that put us on the map.
Right.
And I can say that. It was the fact also that we were willing to do what you're doing here today, which is basically travel to a location to do a face-to-face with the person.
Yeah, great inspiration for all the stuff that we're doing as well. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Groundbreaking, definitely.
And we actually just thought of it off the top of our heads when we went to Tintagel in England, which is one of the former homes of King Arthur. And I had a lot of past life recall in this place, and Bill and I decided we would pool our resources, and we came up with the name. We were both impressed with the round table in Camelot, and yet we knew that if we used Camelot in the name on the internet, we wouldn't be able to get a URL. So we had to put something with Camelot, and I was writing screenplays that were based on Black projects. And a lot of Black projects use the word project before.
Of course, yes,
Project
always.
Blue Book, Project Bluebeam, etc.
Ultra project,
absolutely. So I decided, well, why don't, since we want to deal with Top Secret, why don't we call it Project Camelot? And it stuck, and we were able to get the URL. What happened over the years is that in some, I guess you call them ISPs in some countries, are now banning Project Camelot. So
really,
because
it's too controversial. A lot.
And in fact, in Germany,
viewers.
Germany is one.
Germany,
parts of Germany. I don't know if it's all of Germany. Other places, because we've had people report to us.
Well, that's a huge audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've done small conferences in Germany. We've had some very bizarre experiences there.
Really? Like what?
Well, I was invited to speak at a conference in Germany. This is actually, 3 or 4 years ago, I think, and we went to a German castle, and it was in a very out-of-the-way area, and it was a very small conference, but it was an Illuminati building, and apparently I'm at times quite psychic, and I tapped into the fact that there were a lot of bodies buried in the grounds around the castle, and we found out later from the owners that indeed that was the case.
That was true. Oh, wow.
And that it was, you know, sort of a place that where the, I guess, troops were during Nazi Germany and various things. And then at night, I had a very weird experience. We were in a certain room, and there were said to be...
That was at the castle?
Yeah, there were ghosts that were roaming the halls, and the owners used to... one of them was actually Irish. She was married to the woman, a German woman that I think might have owned the place, but it's a very bizarre setting.
Wow, that's quite something,
really
isn't it?
Strange, yeah.
Yeah, wow. But
and the place where I did the conference was, the whole room was with mirrors and red velvet and, you know, gold, and it was very, very bizarre place.
Wow, interesting though, huh?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we're talking about those memorable shows that you've done and people you've met. You mentioned
okay,
two
so
now.
I said Pete Peterson. Obviously John Lear. These are classics. Bob Dean, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many that Clifford Stone, wonderful man. You know, I can't even remember all the people. You know, their names are not at the tip of my tongue. But Brian O'Leary, very important witness. Gordon Neville.
And they all led you on the path of where you are now, like collecting all of these pieces in the big puzzle.
We were creating the big picture, and so every witness is contributing a piece.
Yes.
And so, yes, absolutely.
So why did you split up from Bill Ryan after how many years of
Really
together?
3 years.
3 years?
Yeah, and so we ended up splitting in, I think it was 2009. And we had a lot of, basically, in the early days, we got along and we agreed on every witness that we were going to interview. As if you have a two-person team, you kind of have to agree on everything. And so it was very easy in the early days. And then as time went on, he became sort of, I think what you may say is more of a prepper. And I was not into that. And not that I don't see a need for being prepared for the future, but my personality is such that I want to be on the avant-garde, the front line, if you will, of the battle for humanity and our sovereignty here on planet Earth. And this is a personal choice. I don't want to hide away, you know, and keep myself safe in these kinds of ways. That I'm not interested in that. So I think that interfered, and then also we had started out in a sort of romantic relationship that ended very quickly.
Okay.
In the first year, it was over at that. And then when we were just friends after that for the final 2 years.
All right.
And then there were a lot of interference from people trying to, I think, influence, especially him. And I think there was one particular witness that is top secret who had a very, what do you say, controversial, competitive relationship with him. And Bill believed completely that this person lied to us. And I do believe that the person is an agent. So agents are trained to lie. That's part of what they do. But they also told us a tremendous amount of truth. And so you had to be discerning as to which it was. And there was one incident that happened and they had a misunderstanding over it and so on and so forth. And I'm not sure exactly what all, you know, it was something between these two men. And I remained friends with this person, and Bill became very sort of aggressive and very unfriendly towards him. And he was convinced that he was trying to split us up, which he wasn't and had nothing to do with that.
Still it happened though, huh?
He was, you know, a person that had a very adversarial relationship with Bill. And Bill and I were already splitting up, and Bill got involved with a woman who was trying to get him to get rid of me as an interviewer and that he would be the star and all this kind of craziness. And there were issues, you know, that cropped up over, and it's kind of like what you might say, creative differences. If you were in Hollywood, you would say that. But we also believe, I think that you could say fairly, that we became a sort of a force to be reckoned with. We were changing the world. I don't think it's, people that know Camelot will say this, and this has been said to us many times, that we changed their lives, that we changed the way the world was looking at this sector that had to do with, we were unafraid to talk about anything and everything.
Right.
Having to do with black projects and the secret space program and UFOs and
you didn't
aliens.
choose and select certain specific areas that you wanted to cover. You did kind of
nothing
go
was
into all...
off limits,
Right.
really. And especially for me, I tend to be, perhaps you might say, more open-minded. Bill was trained as a scientist. We were a very good team in the early days because he was science-based and I was more, I don't know if you want to say creative, spiritual based, and that combination worked really well. And I had the training as a journalist prior to doing Camelot, and also as an actress. So and a director and writer and producer. And so putting that team together and his writing, he was a good writer. He's a very good writer, and you know, he was a webmaster, and I didn't have that skill set.
Right.
So it was really a good combination to start what we did.
Are you sad that it didn't work out in the long run?
No, actually, it was a very good thing, I have to say, because there were some things happened after that that indicated that that he would have gone off mission, in my view. He had other things to be doing in his life, and he took what's called the Avalon Project and made a very good forum out of it, which is a community, right, that investigates and questions things. And
so do you support him in doing that, and do you support him now?
Yeah, I have no issue with him in that way. But I think that what happens is, you know, you have sort of, I know it sounds crazy, but Camelot had a magic about it, and it still does. And something had interfered with us, whether it was also helped by being targeted by the Illuminati and being taken down and being infiltrated by certain negative personalities.
You think that was what happened?
Oh, I definitely, you know, all of that went on. But when you have to take responsibility for what you decide and what you do and the people you spend your time with and so on. So it just became very, very clear that we even brought in some people to do mediation to try to get us to work together. And we did that for about a month, and it clearly went nowhere. So eventually I just took Camelot back, so to speak.
It became a one-woman band.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because of all the places I've been able to go since then and the incredible success of Camelot to this day, I mean, I've done well over 600 video interviews. I've covered, you know, a huge gamut and traveled the world continuously, done a number of conferences, very successful conferences, and continue to do smaller conferences because getting people to attend conferences nowadays is quite difficult. And it's also a very risky financial venture that I tend not to want to do at this point if it's any larger than a small venue. But I have traveled Europe many times and done small conferences and really enjoyed it. I can say that we've gone up by several million this year in unique views of our Camelot, the YouTube channel. So it's 57 million at this time.
That's great, huh?
And that's not bad, considering we're so far out on the fringe.
Yeah.
And then I have 185,000 subscribers to the channel. Right. So it's a very robust, healthy YouTube channel.
And growing.
And always growing every day, every week.
Because people are becoming more aware all the time. How do you analyze, or how do you think, how do you feel that you can trust people that you're interviewing? Who is telling the truth? who is just putting you on or saying something that is disinformation or anything else? How can you validate who is legitimate or not?
Well, it's a many sort of pronged approach, because it's, first of all, like the CIA or any intelligence agency, we use what you call triangulation. So if you get 3 witnesses that come from completely different backgrounds, who don't know each other and are saying the same thing, then you've got a very good sort of gauge to begin to think that this, whatever it is they're saying, may have quite a bit of truth behind it. It doesn't mean you take it to the bank, as they say, or, you know, I'm not going to stake my life on it necessarily. But after 12 years, and look, I did 5 years of radio shows as well, weekly, and several times weekly. So I've got, on top of the video interviews, I've got audio interviews, many of which have actually disappeared, but some are still around. And we don't know how they disappeared off our server, right? But it's just one of those things where I get attacked and things disappear. But I can say we've also done a television show, and that was back in the early days. It wasn't released until several years after they filmed it, because they put it on the shelf. It was so controversial. And that was for True TV.
Really?
Yeah, called Shadow Operations. Mm-hmm. It was a pilot for a TV show.
Right.
And what happened there was that Gordon Neville, who worked for the CIA and always denied it, and I always used to kid him that he was working for the CIA, knowing that he did. And he finally called up late at night in Palm Springs, where we're shooting on location. This was a Hollywood, you know, True TV is
That's
a
before
network.
Camelot.
No, this is in Camelot.
Oh.
This is, you know, right. It was filmed, I think it was, I'm trying to remember when it was filmed. Mm-hmm. I think it was filmed in 2009 and not released until 2010 or 11. I don't know. I don't think I have my timeline right. But at any rate, it was, Bill and I were already more or less split up when we filmed the TV show, because we got it was pitched. We pitched it to a producer who Bill had gotten to know, and he loved the idea and wanted to do the film. And we were sold as the follow-up TV show to be follow-up to the Jesse Ventura conspiracy theory show that became worldwide.
Right.
And at that time, the story went that Jesse didn't want to cover aliens and that we would cover that area. Mm-hmm. So that's what we were supposed to be, like a sister TV show. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of controversial things that went down during the shooting of the pilot. But one of the things that happened was late at night, we were shooting in Palm Springs, and we were shooting with Gordon Neville, who was one of the stars in it, as was Bob Dean and Brian O'Leary and so many people. Can't remember if John Lear is in it, but maybe he is. So many of our Camelot witnesses. And Gordon called me up and said, I have to tell you that I do work for the CIA, and that my superiors, or whatever you want to call it, want to talk to your producer. So I connected them on the phone, and they basically made him an offer that he was not supposed to refuse. That was if they could take over the production and control of the TV show.
And what was going to be in it?
Everything. Then they would allow us to go to series. And basically our producer at the time said no. And so then he was fired. The director was fired. They took certain things, changed certain things, and they basically put it on the shelf for 2 years. And then they released it with no advertising whatsoever. We happened to find out about it like 24 hours before they released it. So it was on TV? Yeah. It was released on TV with no advertising. It was on the schedule for True TV, however, just cropped up, and some of our viewers, our loyal fans, saw that it was going to be on the schedule, and they told us. They didn't notify us. They didn't notify the producers. They didn't. This is how they, you know, sort of make sure that you don't go to series. And so then we did an advertising campaign very quickly, mm-hmm. and you can watch it on my channel. It's there, and you can go to the About Us page on Project Camelot and get the link. It's on that page as well. Right. So it's had a fair amount of views, because we actually took it after it aired that night. It was like a Friday night. and we had a copy of it, and we put it on our channel, and no one ever stopped us from doing that. And we basically, it's had many views. It's been stolen and reposted. And I have it on my channel. Bill has it on his channel. It's actually a very good show. It has all our Camelot witnesses, and it's kind of fun and fairly well shot. You know, it's not perfect. It has some issues and some interesting stories behind the scene. But yeah, so we made that show. So, I mean, we've had levels of success, levels of getting close to breaking into the mainstream, what you might call that.
And Gordon Neville was CIA, and you suspected that without knowing it. And you said that to him, or what?
Okay, well, I know this kind of got off topic because you were asking me how I know if someone's telling the truth.
It's truthful and legitimate.
Well, I use my intuition. I'm very psychic, and I get a lot of information. I always have since I was a kid. And that has actually, I think, protected Camelot, helped save our life, help, you know, with choosing the right people to interview versus the wrong. Some of the people are telling a version of the truth that they believe. Some of the people we interview are telling the real truth. They're not telling it all the time throughout the whole interview. Sometimes there's a trade-off. I've actually been told by certain of our witnesses that they had to lie to us at a certain point. And in order to save their own lives. And sometimes we know exactly what that is. And so that's one of the things that has also, besides triangulation, the first thing I said. And so intuition. And the other thing is basically a tremendous amount of research that I did, that Bill did, that has sustained me throughout this time in Camelot, and then just getting a body of work that is so gigantic at this point, really, seriously, people have to understand that not all the witnesses go on video. Not all the witnesses even go on audio. Some of the witnesses are just sources that are giving me information.
So they're contacting you, or you are contacting them?
They are contacting me.
Right.
In the case of the sources.
Why do they do that and not want to go on camera, for example?
Oh, because, you know, this is common in journalism, as you can appreciate. A lot of people's lives would be in great danger for talking to us.
But they still want to get the information out there to you.
I mean, you have to understand that we're part of a revolution, and that's a revolution that's like a truth revolution. That humanity wants to know who it is, you know, who we are. That humanity has a right to know what our true history is here on planet Earth and off planet. And we have a right to know that that all our money, all our tax dollars are going into black projects, are funding the building of a super soldier program, funding a humanity 3.0, if you will, that it will involve transhumanism and AI, etc. That they have an agenda that involves Satanism, that is funded by drug money, human trafficking, you know, you name it, what are called trading programs, high yield trading programs. You know, and I interview the people that document this, okay? So, and people that are fairly well known, like Catherine Austin Fitts, for example, documenting the trail of the Black Project money that's going down the drain, so to speak, that's leaving, that humans are, especially in the United States, but other places in the world as well, are paying for programs and paying for things that they do not agree with, that they have no knowledge of, that their children are being recruited and used, experimented on, and taken off planet.
Or
through everything, mind control. That projects such as secret underground bases, they're working with aliens on genetically reprogramming humans, that they're abducting humans. In other words, it's a huge story. It's the most important. It's far more important than anything that's going on even in Washington today. You have to understand that that's the project that we started and that we are investigating, and that I am investigating all these years later.
So is that the government that is behind the black operations?
It's a secret government. It's
A
what they
secret
call
government.
it's even beyond what they call the deep state.
Oh, it's beyond the deep state. So, yeah, and is that part of the New World Order agenda?
That's part of, yes, the Illuminati, as they're called,
Mm-hmm.
are behind it, the black magicians. You know, there's so much to the story, but
Mm-hmm.
basically it's the high level ruling families.
And can you talk a little bit
Committee
about
of
that?
300.
Right.
These things have been documented. I mean, David Icke was one of the first people to really sort of name names and follow the bloodlines, because it's all bloodline related. It goes back to the ancient days of Egypt, of Sumeria. Zachariah Sitchin talking about the Anunnaki.
Did you know
off-world.
him?
I met him. Unfortunately, it was right before he died, and he also wasn't willing to do an interview at that time.
He was not.
No.
Because he was sick, or just because he didn't want to talk to you?
I don't know. I know that, you know, there have been a few people that we were about to interview, or we were hoping to interview, in the early days especially. You have to understand that in the early part of Camelot, that there was, they in some ways, it's as if they didn't plan for something like us. Nowadays, people are doing what we do all over the internet.
Right.
But back in those days, other people didn't do what they were. You know, you could name them on one hand, for example, journalists that were doing the kind of pushing, you know, pushing the envelope journalism that I'm talking about. We were unique in the sense that we traveled the world with a camera. So some of those early journalists, and Linda Moulton Howe and Paola Harris are among them, were doing it, but they weren't using video. So we kind of came out the gate with video right away. And so in that way, we sort of broke new ground. And then we also specialized in these, as I say, above top secret witnesses. And for some reason, we were able to sort of enter a time when the what's happening now is that this whole sector is infiltrated, that there's a tremendous amount of mind control and witnesses that are planted with information. And some of them are given good information, and some are controlled releases of information. But back in those days, it's as if they didn't plan for something like us. So we had a special kind of opening in which people, when they heard what we were doing, and then it was word of mouth, it went around the world that people, you know, I've been recognized in the most obscure wilderness situations where, you know, like in the wilds of Ireland, where someone said, "Is that Kerry Cassidy? Yes, you can do, you know, whatever." In other words, this kind of thing. I've been recognized in the streets of Paris, and, you know, this is not ego speaking. It's, you have to understand we were a movement of something that was different at the time, that was bringing in the world.
And you put yourself out there in so many videos, and when that grows, that popularity, then people will know who you are. The internet is amazing that way.
Well, and it was in the early days of the internet as well.
Right,
You know, we kind of grew up with it, if you could say that. And the witnesses that would find out about us would find out from other people who watched our stuff and would say, "You have a story to tell, contact these people. They're doing the cutting edge stuff." So a lot of the witnesses we got we didn't go to them, they came to us.
Right.
And actually, even today, it's often like that. Although I do a live show on YouTube, and I have now for several years, I don't travel as much doing interviews. First of all, I can't afford it. So it became absolutely, you know, out of our realm financially to do the kind of interviews we were doing in the early days. It was good because at the time, Bill was English. He had a car in England, and if you have a car in England, you can actually put it on a ferry and drive around Europe. So that facilitated a lot of the travel that would otherwise require, you know, more expensive plane tickets and that sort of thing. And so all I can say is that we were very lucky in those days. And the record is on the internet. You know.
Did you, being a woman, actually help it more? Because it's unusual to see a woman in that position. We often hear about, oh, it's a man's world, but oftentimes it's actually a woman who can open the door to certain things because you're not used to seeing so many women in this field.
Well, this is true today too. I mean, there are more women entering the field, but
Right.
it's still actually few and far between.
You're one of the few.
Yeah, I guess so. It was a mission that we had to do, and I think that people resonated to the Camelot. I believe the real Camelot is behind us, actually. I believe that we have picked, this is in my book, but I believe that I was around during the days of Camelot, and I believe that we carried forth the Camelot mission from that time.
Oh.
And that was our sort of bond with humanity, and that we did fulfill that bond.
Mm-hmm.
And in essence, we have created what is the virtual roundtable of Project Camelot, is Camelot. Where, you know, we're not about hierarchies. We're about people being created equal, mm-hmm. and telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So that was our mission, and that's what we set out to do, and what has been very successful at this point.
Right. You just mentioned the super soldiers, and I know that you're one of the few people who were part of introducing the super soldier phenomena to the alternative media. Are those super soldier witnesses, or who call themselves super soldiers, are they real? I mean, we have seen people like the late Max Spears, who died under suspicious circumstances last year or the year before.
Right.
This is 2018. I think that was in 2016. Mm-hmm. And others, are they real? Is that something you can verify?
Yeah, this is an augmented soldier. They're doing this all the time. I mean, it's the super soldier. You could say it was a sort of a folk terminology to use to talk about soldiers that are being augmented by the military, mm-hmm. to do more, to be capable of more, to be bigger, better, faster, stronger, more psychic, you name it.
Mm-hmm. Programming of the mind or the spirit, whatever.
The body. And eventually it gets into transhumanism now. We understand it from that terminology. So that's really what a super soldier is. It's an augmented soldier, a soldier that has special skills, special gifts, some of which have started out with the rudimentary material in the human, but then were augmented and encouraged along, sometimes by DNA, genetic and engineering, sometimes by nano implants and other kinds of implants. In the case of Dan Sherman and also of Aaron McCullum, for example, sometimes they were interfered with in their mother's stomach before they were born.
Because she was involved in some elitist groups?
The story with Dan Sherman is that his mother was basically interfered with so that he would become a alien human communicator. And that's all on my website, so watch his interview if you're interested. And then Aaron McCullum, who was basically appears to have been a dolphin-human hybrid. And so he has dolphin DNA.
And can that be traced?
I don't know. In other words, I didn't go with him to a doctor to have a test.
Right.
But
he claims that.
He claims this, and there appears to be reason to believe him.
Okay.
And you have to understand that in vetting a witness, I go through a very special process. And I do not believe in Camelot. Our premise from the early days was that documentation could be faked. So it doesn't matter if you give me a stack of documents saying you are who you say you are. I don't care, because Obama's birth certificate is a perfect example.
Exactly,
they can fake anything. Mm-hmm. So we understand that. But what I'm interested in is the human being, that I'm talking to. And when I deal with these people, part is my psychic intuition. Again, it's how they talk about themselves. It's the amount of work they've done to uncover hidden memories. Mm-hmm. It's their intelligence level. It's their personality. It's the way they speak to you. It's the human, eye-to-eye contact. How programmed they are or how not programmed they are, or how they've broken through their programming. there are so many signs, neuro-linguistic signs, etc. So I wasn't necessarily trained to do that kind of interrogation, if you will call it that, or be able to vet a witness necessarily. But for some reason, I guess I have gifts that I rely on.
You acquired those abilities
Yes.
as you went along with all of these interviews, huh?
Yeah, well, obviously, and I was the key interviewer, so it's my human sort of connection.
Empathy.
Oh, of course.
Empathy.
I wanted to be a director in Hollywood, and one of the things you do is you work with actors, and so you have to be very empathetic, and you have to be able to imagine yourself in more than one role, to be able to talk to an actor about their role, etc. So I had training, professional training in that way, but I can say that it's beyond that. I mean, I believe now that it was clearly a mission that I was set out to be part of. I think back in my own history, I was abducted by aliens. I think I myself was augmented. I've had evidence that I've been helped physically as well as in other ways.
Was that a clairvoyant telling you that?
I have had some very, what happened in my early 20s, I decided that I wanted to reach enlightenment, and I decided this on my own, and I didn't have any teachers, and I went and got a couple books. I read about it, and then I set myself up in New York City, and I was working temp jobs, and I was meditating all day and all night, and eventually didn't even go to work all the time. And I connected all my chakras and reached levels of samadhi. So I've had multiple samadhi experiences since then. That kind of, it's a physiological, when you do that kind of thing, it's a physiological thing, which changes you. It changes your DNA, it changes your physiology, and it heightens your intelligence, it heightens your abilities to do certain things, and certainly heightens your intuition.
And did you do that as well without drugs?
Oh yeah.
You did?
Yeah, of course. You can't do it with drugs. It's not.
Because a lot of people have experiences using ayahuasca or
but those are
LSD.
Those are assisted. You can have experiences that way, but in order to do what I'm talking about, like go down this sort of road to enlightenment, you have to be able to be self-generate. Well, it's self-generating. So in other words, the idea is that you become a sun, like a sun in the sky, a star and then a sun. In other words, you are a human is simply, if you want to say the path here on planet Earth, you are learning to be a self-generating sun. So, for example, when you look at pedophilia and Satanism, what they're really doing is feeding energy off another being in order for them to be bright and them to be alive and them to be young. But when you go into this form of meditation and you activate yourself, you get activated, then you begin to generate and be the light more and more. And it comes from within you and it goes out. So you no longer need to feed on other energies. Because, we talk about pedophilia and we talk about Satanism and drinking blood and all this horrible stuff. And yet what it really is when you gel it all down is energy. It's about one being stealing energy from another because that being feels less than, does not know how to generate the energy from within themselves. They are not a self-generating sun. So the purpose of activating this physical body we have is that within us we have the ability not to have to feed on anything outside of ourselves, but to be able to give to the world through our light that we generate by developing ourselves into, in essence, like a sun. So this is a process, and that's why they call it enlightenment. And Illuminati know very well this process, and I think you've studied some of this, so you probably know some of this yourself. But it's not commonly talked about, I realize that. There's always a choice, and the same thing with the secret space program. They have made a choice that they don't want to take the time that's required to be able to activate themselves as humans. They want to go the dark path, and the dark path feeds on others. It's power over others. Mm-hmm. So that's a personal choice, and every human makes that choice along their path.
Is that an easy way Or
And
a shortcut? Or like
well, yeah, in a
power?
certain sense, it's an easy way, but it's not. It's never sufficient. You know, you must keep in mind the vampire always needs more blood. There's no end to it because they are never going to self-generate. If they were to self-generate, they would become more truly enlightened, not just the Illuminati as they call themselves. They basically deny the path of the light. So what I was talking about before is that it's very interesting that people fault, you know, they think, okay, we're going to out the pedophiles, but you're never going to out all the humans that want to desire energy from outside themselves because they're not self-generating. They need to learn the path. Do you understand? Mm-hmm. And so what happens is you're not going to put all the pedophiles in jail and then we're done. That's it. The reptilian side of humanity, the reptilian brain and the reptilian DNA that is within every human at this point, makes them such that they desire to be power over, to feed on others. I mean, humans are at a stage where they are still taking energy from other living things, eating meat, eating vegetables, eating something other than sunlight. You see, we are still feeding on other energy sources.
But do you think we could survive without eating at least vegetables?
Eventually we will, actually. Eventually we will. That's what ascension is all about. It's not, you know, it's more physically based than people realize. It's not just a mental process. It's not just think good thoughts and eventually you'll be there. That's where you get these sort of what I call, you know, new agers or light workers. You know, we should be light warriors, not light workers.
But war is like going to battle or combat.
Going to battle against the dark, because that's the only way the light is going to survive.
That's also a battle, right?
It is a battle. And so what I'm saying is you cannot deny that this earth is a battlefield. And that's part of the process of learning how to deal with the light and the dark and how bringing them in and basically making them sort of merge in such a way that you filter it through to become pure light. You know, that's the process. And all I'm saying is that when humanity is looking to punish people, punish the killers, punish the people that are sucking the blood from other parts of humanity, you have to understand that this impulse is within the race. And therefore, you're not going to solve it by putting people in prison or by killing a few pedophiles. It's never going to happen. That's not going to be the solution. It's understanding that we have to go into ourselves, that live the lives and go through the experiences that bring us the wisdom, activate the heart chakra through the love impulse, etc., and merge all of that so that we can become, again, self-generating. We create the energy. There is no limits on energy. You see, this idea of scarcity that people talk about, everything the Illuminati teaches in their schools since you're very young. I mean, I know super soldiers that believe completely in what they were told by their Illuminati masters, that scarcity is the name of the world, that we have too many people on the planet, that we can't handle it. The planet is being depleted. It doesn't have to be that way. It's a hologram. We are creating. We are the most incredible creators, and that's what our true destiny is. You see, we not only come from a creator, but we are creators ourselves.
Talk about that holographic world, the hologram that you were mentioning. Let's just touch upon that big topic for a moment.
I'm not a scientist. I can tell you I understand it intuitively. I understand because, you know, I've studied the Mahabharata in India. I've studied the Bhagavad Gita. I understood. I probably did this in other lives. I took a class one time from an Indian teacher who said, you know all this stuff, you know, and gave me straight A's. I brought it in with me in this life. So I understand it. But I can tell you that the Eastern philosophy has always known this, will say that this reality is all Maya, okay? Illusion.
Illusion.
That's the same thing as saying it's a hologram, basically. You know, it's an image. It's a play to learn
projection?
from. Yeah, in essence. And you know, in the end, it doesn't really matter. You know, in a sense, there is no death. You understand? So when humans are eventually going to learn this, they have to know it. So what are they doing in order to find out that there is no death? They kill each other over and over and over again in multiple lives. That's all they do. It's because death is like the ultimate aphrodisiac and attractor. But it's because
Really?
it's not real. You see, and what humans are like little children that are trying to really sort of play with this thing until they can figure out how it works. And how it works is you don't really die. So it doesn't matter how many times you kill this vehicle. I don't go anywhere. I'm still here and I'll do whatever I want. You know, I'll come back into another vehicle if necessary. I'll move on, whatever I do.
So what happens to us when we die?
Well, that's just it. We have, you know, in essence, a soul. I mean, this is, of course, understood and known by many people intellectually, but they don't grok it. They don't really understand it. They still, you know, it's a natural thing. We've been taught so many lies since childhood, and religion has been a huge culprit in this matter.
Yeah.
So that people actually are so, you see, Satanists are what is called spiritual materialists. They fully believe in only the material realm because this is the only place they can have power. Once they leave here and they no longer have the physical body, have the power over others, money, you know, their greed, their possessions, etc., they lose their power. They have no power over. They're just this weak, you know, desiring sort of soul that hasn't really learned its lessons very well and is going to be grasping to learn and feed on other things until it gets to a place where it can actually believe, oh, I can walk without the help of other humans, without slaves, you know, to do my every need, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the path, you know, and I have to say that this is the sort of thing that I studied in great depth before I ever got into Project Camelot. So I'm not your normal interviewer or researcher in that sense. You know, I was never very interested in Roswell, for example. I probably couldn't tell you very many facts and figures about Roswell or its witnesses. It's only recently I started to investigate it more because I thought, well, I should go back and learn this thing. You know, but that's not thrilling to me. When I got into ufology, I found out that they would talk about all the craft in great length and this sighting and that sighting and so on, but they would never talk about the occupants. And it fascinated me, and I thought to myself, this is ridiculous. It's like talking about what kind of car you drive, but never talking about you.
Who's inside?
Exactly. And to me, this is the whole point.
And I want to really go into that and talk about these alien races. But I would like to just continue a little bit about what happens to us when we die, when the soul leaves the body. There's a lot of new stuff out there about that, actually. Some people have come to new ideas of what is happening. People who have had near-death experiences or out-of-body experiences all kind of say the same things. Whether you are religious or actually atheist or anything, they talk about the tunnel of light. You see a live review and you come to this white light vibration frequency. You see people that you have known that have gone before you, your family members, and you will meet, if you're a Christian, a Jesus figure or Muhammad,
yes, but you know, this
whatever.
is very traditional also programming.
Right.
So in other words, it's important to understand that humanity, as much as they are trying to learn truth at this time, there is also a huge dose of programming, of trying to own the narrative by the media that are owned by the Illuminati and run by the Illuminati, in Hollywood that is influenced to make movies that continue some of the lies and distortions.
So that can happen even if you have a near-death experience of kind of really
Absolutely, you can still be going through a movie
declared
that someone
dead.
else is putting into your mind, an implant.
Even after kind of dying for a moment?
Yes, an implant is, you can be implanted in your astral body, let's say. And you can also be implanted before you leave this realm, so that you take those ideas with you. You know, I had a very interesting experience when my mother died. She died of cancer. And I knew long before she died that she was going to die, even when she started to look better and feel better. But she had gone through that horrible chemo type stuff.
Right.
And I knew it was killing her. And I knew she was going to leave. And I used to kid her. I've always been this type of person, but I would tell her that, she must understand I wasn't going to cry when she died, because I knew she wasn't really going to die, and that, she would live on. And I've always known things about my past lives and so on and so forth. So she would laugh at me, and, she would sort of roll her eyes. But what happened after she died is I had a very interesting dream. And in the dream, this was a few days after she died, she was laying in a coffin. And I went up to the coffin and I reached my hand out and I just took her hand and pulled her upright, out of the coffin.
You did?
She said to me in her normal voice that always talked to me, "Kerry, how did you do that?" And I said, "Mom, it's easy." And basically what I was seeing was, and I believe this truly happened. In other words, someone would say, "Oh, it was just a dream," whatever. I happen to believe many dreams actually do happen in other realities, but nonetheless, you see, this was indicative of what I'm talking about. She had said before she dies, "I don't believe in an afterlife. I think you just die, that's it. That's the end of you," and so on. And I was convinced that, of course, it was not the end of my mother. She's a soul. She's going to continue, and she was a beautiful soul. And so I didn't think I was going to have such a dream, but it came to me, and it was so very, very real. And
a lucid dream?
Yeah, perhaps. It was the sort of thing where you see something so clearly that she was having her mind changed by that experience of me being able to go in, and she was just laying in the coffin because she thought she was dead. I think a lot of spirits do that, you see. A lot of spirits get stuck on their way because they don't know, they believe things in life that are completely wrong. And this is where you get, ghosts inhabiting and being stuck in certain realities and so on. So these are real, and I've seen ghosts and been able to interact with them my whole life.
But do you think there can be a deception on the, let's say, the fourth dimension,
Sure.
The white light? Is
Absolutely.
that real? People are talking about archons now. They're talking about if they are creating, let's say, an illusionary dimension, even the white light, the karma wheel,
all
going
of that
back
is,
into a body, white memory, and then a new experience to feed on human being souls.
Yes. Well, there are ways to delay a person's progress, so to speak. But, I have an ultimate sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, instinctual faith in the power of the soul and in the power of the light. So I don't think it matters how long it takes you to get from A to Z, so to speak, to return to source if you wish, and to come again out of source.
How do we return to source? What is that?
Well, it's simply, we see it as a journey, but you got to remember that humans see things in linear terms.
Yeah, time.
This happens, then this happens, and it's all simultaneous. Most scientists even will have to admit at this point that time and space are illusions.
So everything has already happened.
Yes, in a sense. I mean, that it is constantly happening, that it is all simultaneous. We just tend to parse it out so that we can sort of focus. It's a matter of focus. It's like weaving a huge rug, but concentrating on just one thread at a time in order to follow it through. It's that sort of thing.
So it's okay to go to the white light, and if
First of
archons
all,
are feeding on our souls?
It's important to understand that what people are calling the white light is not always the same white light. It's not all lights are the same. Not all light beings are the same. And you can be deceived by one being looking like a light being when in reality it's a dark being.
So they can change form.
Absolutely. And all I'm saying is that I would be very careful with thinking that everyone is doing the same thing and that all these experiences are the same. They're not, because your soul sort of progress is very intimate to who you are.
So there is a progress.
Yes, it's still an illusion of progress if you have, even if it's all simultaneous.
Right.
Again, because we are going through this process in order to, it's kind of like at play in the fields of the Lord, so to speak, if you want to call it that, put it in biblical terms. It's Godhead, which is made up of everything. It's just a word, Godhead.
Source.
It's not a person, source, the force, the creator. I don't care what you call it, but it's the idea that it is at play. It is ever evolving and re-evolving itself and its facets of itself. And we are facets of that. So,
but if everything has happened already, why do we need? Well, how can we evolve? How can we progress?
Again, that's why I say it's re-evolving. Understand? It's more of a circle. You know, the circle is one of the most basic. I don't know, platonic solids, I suppose that you call it. In other words, the circle and the spiral are, in my way of viewing, the most basic and the most sort of containing the most information about this process you're questioning about.
The torus?
The torus is another sort of image that can be useful. But what I'm saying is that it is that's why the Illuminati use the image of the snake eating its tail. Keep in mind that we are ever becoming and becoming and becoming. Nietzsche put it very well, you know, the idea of constant return. So you're going in and you're coming out. It's like your breath. You know, you're being born and you're dying. You're coming in and going out, and you're never really dying.
So that's not a soul trap, like an orchestrated soul trap by these entities?
I think there's a sort of... I think it's a fad right now. I think there's an overemphasis on this idea of souls being trapped, again, by the white light, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay.
I think this is, again, a program. You want to believe in it, go ahead. You'll probably attract it to yourself. You know what I'm saying? But it's not unique to each soul. It's you know, you can see beyond it. You may already be beyond that. Don't you see?
But if we are aware of it in this lifetime, then maybe when we die, our consciousness will continue, if that is how it is.
It's not going to stop your consciousness from continuing anyway. You can be aware of it and hope that it helps you on your journey, but you may not, you know, you may be beyond that. All I'm doing is telling you that it's not something you have to go through.
Right. So you can choose to go to source.
There. Yeah, you can choose to do whatever the hell you want, ultimately. In other words, we are going there and we are already there. It's all one. It really is all one. You know, we do this for fun, for experience, for realization, for, you know, for entertainment. And so do all the other beings out there. In other words, this is a process.
So we're taking life too seriously, really, in this three-dimensional world.
No, I think it has to be taken seriously. I think that you have to live with integrity every moment. And I think that's the only way to live. But that doesn't mean it can't be fun, and it doesn't mean that it can't be continually creative.
So we should not live in fear of what is actually going on this planet?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think it's you know, look, it's natural when you're a vulnerable physical being to have fear. In fact, fear is, you're stupidly courageous if you have no fear. You need to, if you have intelligence, you have fear because you understand that fire can burn, for example. So if you put yourself in those positions, you may understand that you could be fearful in the moment. But it's what courage is about overcoming the fear and being beyond it and transforming yourself and transcending it. And so that's what really matters. The fear does not matter. The fear is an illusion anyway. And you will get beyond it. All beings do eventually, you know.
So going back to the satanic stuff that these these elite groups are using or they're practicing. Why are they doing that? Why do you think they're doing it?
Again, it's a
are they
choice.
doing that? Are they doing it?
It's kind of like going down the dark path to find out where it ends, and sort of teaching yourself that
But
path.
why that choice?
Because some people are attracted to the dark. You know, in other words, it's an exploration. Everything in life is an exploration. And these beings that choose that path, eventually they will find the limitation. See, they're attracted by limitation. Limitation makes them feel safe, makes them feel powerful. They have some very bad sort of inclinations. They want to, in other words, you can see what this photo is made of. It has, I think, glass on the front. By taking it and smashing it, and then we find out it had glass, and it really was glass because it breaks in many pieces. Or you can observe it and sort of kind of understand it and see it with your eyes and know it that way without harming it. You know, you can do no harm. So it's really a choice, and that's what spirit becoming aware is all about. And eventually, even the dark will go to the light.
But why do you think that is happening so much? You talk often about that happening in, say governmental circles or New World Order circles of these elitists, and also in Hollywood. Can you explain a little bit? Can you talk a little bit more about that? How is it happening? Why is it happening? And why is that connected to something dark?
It's a level of youthfulness that ends up getting stuck as a result of its choices. So what happens in, for example, Hollywood, it's about power over others. This sector is one of what we call polarity. It's a polarity between the dark and the light, and the two are in essence in battle. So when the people that choose certain lines of work and then get themselves into very dark places, they do it out of ego gratification, out of a feeling of being less than and wanting to be greater than. In other words, you're either, a power position is you're either you're a victim, or you're all powerful, you're in charge, right? So they flip from one side to the other, and most lives are involved with going from one side to the other. And most learning experiences are involved in that, and relationships as well. Most relationships are not even, not the round table of Camelot we're talking about, but they are actually hierarchical. Many people have friends, lovers, husbands, wives who would facilitate them getting through certain doors. They're, following their own ego, following their own desires to be, richer, more famous, more beautiful, more whatever it is they're seeking. In other words, they are motivated by a feeling of less than. And so this is their drive to, you could call it better themselves, but also to experience this reality. It's understandable when a person grows up in poverty that they're going to look at someone with wealth and think that that's a better life and be driven to try to emulate that person. If along those lines, they are required to do certain deeds that require killing people, et cetera, they are going to have to, absolutely, they'll have to make a choice, right? If you're an actress, you will sleep with a producer to get a part. If you don't sleep with the producer, you don't get a part. I mean, one of the reasons I ended up, after 20 years in Hollywood, as not being on the team of the Old Boys Network is because I wouldn't play the game.
So you were exposed to things like what we hear about Weinstein and those
Absolutely.
things. You were...
I mean, I didn't come too close to, like, sort of, I guess, I mean, people tried to seduce me or whatever it was, but I understood
that you didn't want to go to bed with.
That I wouldn't go in that direction. So I had offers. I mean, anyone gets offers, but it's what you do with it. It's what you choose. I always had an inner integrity. I mean, I can say I've been through enough lives to where I understand that I need to be able to look myself in the face, that I need to be at peace with who I am, that's my first and foremost, most important thing at the end of the day. Otherwise, you're actually bound to repeat it. That is, I do believe, how the universe works.
Really? Yeah. So the karma wheel is true.
And so it will be for every person that does ill to another. They will experience that an ill, you know, whether it's the exact same thing or not is another matter. But generally, yeah.
So that's not just a story or an idea like many things in religion and hell and heaven.
It's life
and all
experience. I mean, every human eventually finds this out. It has to do with understanding the learning experience that is this thing we call life, and what comes with it, and, you know, what you take away from it. And if you get to know your prior lives, you can also sort of see your own path in that way. So many people who do visit their prior lives will know the things that they, if you want to call it, did wrong, the wrong choices they made, that they may be doing right in this life, that sort of thing. You can get quite high in Hollywood, in my view, on a sort of on the road to stardom, if you will, and still be on a level of innocence, and still not necessarily be a victim of pedophilia or something. But at some point, at some juncture in your career, you will be corralled. You will have to make certain concessions to play ball with the Illuminati. There's no doubt about it. Whether you will actually be sexually, you know, preyed upon, you will certainly get offers. I mean, I don't think you can avoid that, but you may refuse them and still be a success to a certain point. I think there is some time at which there may be a push come to shove. You know, even Camelot, we understood, and this is pretty true for a lot of people, is that they allowed us to go to a certain place before they interfered with us slightly here and there, but then they didn't really like hit us hard until the longer we were on the scene. And some people get payback, you know, many years later, like we were talking about Ronnie, I don't know how to say her name.
Dr. Ronnie Kildare.
Yeah. The question is whether she was killed or not. They may have waited a very long time to kill her, in essence, but they could still have
So you think that could have been possible, that she was targeted and killed?
Yeah, they hasten the end. Sometimes they wait quite a long time. They use and abuse a person. Gordon Neville was used and abused over and over again, and then they finally killed him. You know, this kind of thing is going on all the time. The Illuminati do use methods, remote viewing one of them, certainly this thing called looking glass that Dan Burish talked about.
Which is looking into another dimension?
This is a means by which they can see the person's trajectory. It's basically, for all intents and purposes, most likely a form of alien artificial intelligence. The aliens have had the ability and have given some of those abilities to us, those technologies, I guess you would call it, to look into the future and see. It's a matter of probability. It doesn't mean it will happen, but if it has like a 90% probability, it's very likely that it will. They can see a person's life path in this life, and they can chart it, the probability that you're going to do this or that. So they could, in theory, know who I was and where I was going at a young age. I know I was heavily surveilled since childhood.
Why?
One of the reasons I know that is because, and I tell this on several interviews, when I was, I don't know, around 11 years old, I went on a, or maybe even younger, I went to on a childhood school field trip to NASA, to Ames Research. I grew up in the Bay Area in Northern California.
All right.
And near the home of Apple Computer, and Apple Computer didn't exist back then, but nonetheless. And I walked into the place with my school companions, and I looked around and I recognized it and said I knew exactly where I was. And the only way that could happen is if I had, you know, prior knowledge. And so I have to say that, you know, there's a number of things like that in my childhood that I can look back. And so, you know, that's how I know.
Do you think you were part of an experiment you don't know about?
I think we're all part of an experiment we don't know about. I mean, I think that's what humanity is. We are a grand experiment.
Right, organized in this three-dimensional world.
Yes, it's a grand play. It's for the purposes of enlightenment, in my view.
So talk about mind control for a moment. I know that's a topic you've talked about a lot over the years, and most researchers have. How widespread is it? How many people are actually under the influence of mind control? And what is trauma-based and what is more like, say, a collective mind control, if you will?
Television is an instrument of mind control. So since television has been around, we have had mind control. But the Nazis were involved in researching and experimenting and using mind control in the early days of Nazi Germany. We know that. I can say mind control likely goes back as far as humanity does on this planet, which is several seedings going back, millions of years and much further back than conventional science will tell you. So I'm sure that they did mind control in Egypt, for example. I mean, advertising is mind control. Religion is gigantic mind control program. I mean, and one of probably the most successful, if you want to say, on the planet. Education is mind control. I mean, in a certain sense, controlling the mind is the name of the game. And to become a master, to become a spiritual master, you must learn to control your own mind. But when you decide to control the minds of others, then you're exercising this power over others again. So this is extremely pervasive.
Some of the trauma-based mind control slaves, supposedly, they came out after a certain amount of deprogramming and talked openly about their experiences as a governmental mind-controlled slave. What do you think is true or not about that? We've heard about Kathy O'Brien, and we've heard about Bryce Taylor and others. Are they legitimate? Is
Sure.
what they're talking about involves an staggering and incredible amount of very famous names in their books and people that they were involved with on a governmental level and also celebrities. What do you know about that?
Well, I think, first of all, when you look at all this information, you have to keep in mind there's multiple realities. And this, I think the person who wrote most eloquently about this was in the Seth material by Jane Roberts, who was in contact with a being called Seth. And I read those books when I was around 12 years old. So if you understand that we have multiple realities, and we definitely have a parallel reality to this particular reality, and probably parallel realities in every, there's a light, there's a dark, there's a yin, there's a yang. This, multiverse is part of that, and so it's constantly like that. But in essence, mind control can be sort of exercised in any of those realities. And so one of the things the Illuminati and the scientists have learned to do is to deal with your astral body as opposed to your physical body. And to get your astral body to do and to believe certain things and to actually activate it and to exercise it in certain other realities to do their bidding. So I think that some of the time when somebody has an implanted memory of being sexually abused by, let's say, a senator or congressman or president or whoever it is, I think it may be happening in the astral.
So it's not real?
It's no, on the
Physically
contrary. It's important to understand, again, it has to do with how materially based you are. Mm-hmm. Dreams and the dream world are really excursions into other realities, in my view. So they're not imaginary in the sense that you would think about them.
They're also physical.
They're as real as this is. Uh-huh. And they have as much impact on the overall sort of human complex that is called you as anything else. Anything that happens in this reality. We flicker in and out of this reality. We're actually, even sitting in your own body at this moment, you're not here all the time. And neither am I. Our consciousness is constantly going in and out and going elsewhere. And sometimes you can tap into this if you pay very close attention to where your mind goes in your thought patterns. Suddenly you realize that, oh, I wasn't here, I was somewhere else. Sometimes you can get pieces of conversation that were going on wherever you happen to have gone. So it's, humans are very complex and very, we are spirit first is the way I like to say it, and the way I understand it. And so we are not, this again is a vehicle in this, what we call material, and it looks very solid. But even scientists will tell you it's simply that these molecules, whatever you want to call it, electrons, are moving slower. And so like you get a stone that is seeming more solid than a piece of paper, for example. It's all to do with, you can walk through walls. And this is obviously something the men who stare at boats.
But everything is made out of atoms, right? And if you go really close to that, it's not solid.
And if you also learn to sort of change the aspect of your physicality, you can actually walk through a wall, for example, if you match yourself with the pace of those atoms, and so on. This is something the CIA has investigated in great depth.
So a lot of those mind control witnesses or reports is not necessarily real in the way that they describe it?
It's as real as anything, and sometimes it may be absolutely real. Their body may be, used and abused in this reality exactly as they describe it. All I'm saying is that's not the only way you can be used and abused.
Right.
The good news is that you can be used and abused on many of the levels beyond this one, the 3D, what we call the 3D, and this particular reality that you think you're in now. When in reality, it depends how, I'm not a person who likes numbers all that much, but for example, Ashiana Dean, someone I interviewed who is in contact with what she calls the guardian races, that I've also apparently been in contact with, will tell you that we have 12 simultaneous incarnations going on at any given time. Not just in this reality, but others. In other words, that I have 12 bodies operational at any given time. We are time travelers by nature. That's what a human being is. So this is really what we're talking about. It's very important. I mean, quantum physics is starting to understand these concepts. Scientists are going there, okay? What I'm talking about, what I understand sort of innately, if you want to call it that. This is, again, enhanced my work because I don't know where I get all of this, but I know that I understand it. You know what I mean? And so it doesn't really matter whether you believe or you don't believe. It's there. It's there. It's real anyway. It doesn't require your belief for something to be real. I think it's important to say that.
Right. So the television show called Fringe was actually quite real.
Oh, very.
Very real.
Yeah.
And they were inspired by
what I'm talking about, multiple realities.
Right.
Things that scientists and people like Geordie Rose with D-Wave are talking about.
And the X-Files as well.
Absolutely.
And even the philosophy.
Stranger Things is another current television hit that addresses this as well. They can believe it's just a movie or just, it's fiction. But you see, humans are also extremely intuitive by nature. And we know when someone is lying to us, for example. We may not acknowledge that we know. We may need to sort of get out from under our own stuff in order to realize what we really do see. A lot of people like to deny what their true self is telling them for a long time until they reach a place where they absolutely have to listen for one reason or another, maybe because it'll save their life, and then their life will be transformed forever. In other words, we know a lot more than we think we know, and we've been taught through programming to think we don't know. You're supposed to think that only experts know and that you don't know. This is an illusion as well.
And what they're
We
saying
are
on
all
television
knowers.
and in the news.
Yes, of course. That, you know, in other words, we can sense when our government is lying to us. And now, I mean, the lies are so prolific and so constant that if you turn on the news, you're going to be lied to constantly. This reality has been a lie in many ways. But you have to remember that we elected to come here and experience this. You as a soul, every soul, has a reason for doing that, for coming here.
At this particular time.
At any particular time. In other words, they have a mission, they have something they want to accomplish, they have a reason for being, a reason for going through these experiences. And so I think it's just important to know if you volunteered to be here and if you can get in touch with yourself on a deep level to find out why, then you may sort of embrace your reality in a much more healthy way. And ultimately, that means, you know, I have a friend who was feeling ill, and I said, so why are you ill? And they said, well, I just feel ill. And they don't understand that there's levels of things happen in the, what you may say, the ether, other dimensions. This is one of the last dimensions where something will come down into material reality. That's the last stage. In other words, you have cancer long before it materializes, you know? And by the same token, you can heal yourself by going back down that path. In other words, backtracking it. Richard Bartlett is somebody I interviewed who uses this in what he calls matrix energetics. In other words, if you have an injury, he has learned a technique in which you can walk a person back through that experience such that that experience can be unhappen. And in doing so, you can heal yourself.
Wow.
And he has in his books, much evidence of this. So, you know, it's understanding that this is an illusion, you know.
Louise Hay always talked about heal your body. She had a very famous book that was called that. What do you think of Louise Hay's work, that it's a thought pattern, it's something, well, in essence, the law of attraction? I
think the law of attraction is very, one of the real laws, but I also think the law of opposition is also a law. So I think there's, you know, it's again a popular thing to talk about what one attracts, but I think, you know, it's an interesting thing that they say is that one of the things that when you reject something, you attract it. So It's an interesting dichotomy. You know, the Illuminati are very familiar with this, and occult knowledge is familiar with this, which is, you know, the information that they base their philosophy on. In other words, it's thesis, antithesis, synthesis. That is the triangle, and that is the paradigm for this this reality. And so what, in essence, you need to do is get to that place of synthesis. You have to take the opposites and get to that place where they sort of are null and void, and then you're back to the beginning again. So it's understanding that process exists and not fighting it, you know, not fighting the one side over the other side, but understanding they're both going to be resulting from any action in this. It's just the laws of the way this universe works. And
you can learn to deal with it in a better way because you understand that some obstacles will come.
Encourage the negative. Yeah.
Right.
You can also attract the good, you know.
Of course, yes.
So, sure.
So you talked about the news, and we were being lied to. We're talking about the fake news. What is actually going on when we're seeing all the news reports around the world, and we are experiencing all of these terrible terror attacks around the world? Can you talk a little bit about that? You have certainly made many shows about that.
As we look back in history, from what I understand now, there are more and more incidents that we thought were, you know, negative things like the attack on Pearl Harbor or other ones, where basically they were created by the very people, yes, by the people who supposedly were affected by them, just like 9/11. So yes, I mean, false flags are part of the way this state tries to exercise its will over humanity and to frighten people.
Is that the reason they're doing it?
The reason is to control, always having power over, always controlling humanity.
Why?
Because they want to be on top. They want power over others. They want to feed off of humanity. And in order to do so, they must keep control over you, because you may go elsewhere. It's like revealing that aliens exist will actually put them in a place of not having any power, because suddenly races that have, bigger, better, faster machines than you and possibly are smarter or more evolved, at least at this stage in the game, or appearing to be, will be more powerful over you. And the last thing an Illuminati ever wants to be is the man on the bottom, so to speak. So this is what the entire secret space program is all about. It's all about conquering the worlds, being on top. When you go out into space, being the one in control. This is, these are their choices. Now, there's a part of the secret space program that is all about protecting humans and protecting Earth in a good way. And there's a part of that sort of contingent that has begun to break away. And this is why we have some of the things, the arrests that Trump is involved in working on, and so forth. There are white hats. There are good people out there, people that have even worked for the dark side, like a whistleblower, for sometimes 15, 20, 40 years, have suddenly had a crisis of conscience, are getting close. A lot of whistleblowers are quite old, in case you didn't notice. The reason they get to that place is because they realize they're going to leave this reality. And they may have sort of an inkling that they're going to have to come back and repeat it, and that they did some people a great deal of wrong. That they may have done humanity some disservice. So suddenly they want to change their path, and they want to go onto the path of the light. And so that's what they do. So that's kind of what's happening, and the secret space program is no exception. And the members of it are now sort of changing their ways and deciding that they need to educate most of humanity that is completely in the dark. They need to actually use people like Project Camelot and others to reveal some of the truths that they've known all along.
Get it out there.
Right. And so they now, where they were stopping us let's say 3 years ago, suddenly they're allowing us. Because it's serving their agenda. You've got to keep that in mind. Now, unfortunately, a lot of those reasons for doing what appears to be doing good may actually serve a darker agenda. So that's also part of the story.
Trump, who is he? Why is he in the position that he is right now as the president, probably the most hated president of the United States ever?
I understand there's a large contingent on the left that supposedly hates him, but I don't, I think that he was created in the role he's playing to be, draw fire, if you will. He is, I do think he's playing a role. I saw his birth chart. Did a show with an astrologer, Maxine Taylor, who's quite a good astrologer. And one of the things that came out, and I do read astrology charts, and I could see that he was the trickster. That's a very big part of his chart. He has a lot of stuff in the 12th house, which is, hidden relationships, etc. I think that he is doing a job. I think he's agreed to do a job. I think he was supposed to draw fire, and he is supposed to have attracted a certain sector of the American public. The election was, in essence, stolen from the dark side. That's how it happened. It wasn't people voting. This is complete nonsense. This is not the way presidents are elected.
Smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. The reality is that what they did do was they did infiltrate the technology in such a way that was being stolen for Hillary to steal it back for Trump. That was a kind of you could call it a technology coup,
right,
by a sort of a coup d'etat in our government that took place.
But why would they allow Trump to be in that position?
Because Trump is representing a growing side of the military that is rebelling against the established order.
Really? So it's kind of the white hats who had
Yes.
put him in that position
Yeah,
in
that-
order
yes.
to make a conflict within the New World Order structure?
Yeah, there was always been conflicts within the New World Order. There are factions that hate each other, every bit as much as they hate humanity. So, this is what I think is going on. Now, how long this will be allowed, how much power they really do have, whether they will be successful in the long run, I think is yet to be seen. But I think there are many reasons why he probably was chosen for the role. He's a showman, he's a grand
Reality star, really.
Well, there you go. But, I think there's also some, I guess you might say, a different way of playing the political game than ever was quite played before. The people that are backing him, I think some of these people are playing for the other side, appearing to be something other than who they truly are. And they may be working for the light and appear to be dark characters. And I think Trump himself is such a person.
So
This
he's
is
not
my
a
view.
puppet put in that position in order for people to really hate on him and then direct their attention to a new kind of savior or kind of a person like Obama who's more charming and coming into the picture afterwards.
It doesn't matter. It's kind of the union of opposites that keeps happening. In other words, Obama was supposed to be somebody who was going to live up to a lot of his promises,
Change.
who did the complete opposite. Trump is supposed to be somebody who changes his mind every minute, but in reality is doing some very good things behind the scenes.
Really?
Absolutely. So this is the kind of thing going on. In other words, I think that politics is a hall of mirrors, and it's important for people to keep that in mind.
And you don't vote?
No, I don't. I think
Right.
that voting is a complete illusion.
So how come Trump was elected in November or December 2016?
Well, look, he was chosen by a faction that
Right.
then stole the election by using the technology that's available.
But half a year prior to that he was elected, whatever, in May 2016, he went and had a meeting with Henry Kissinger.
Yeah, and actually, Jared Kushner is actually met with Kissinger as well. It's interesting to look at the story and try to decide who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. And at every juncture, you begin to see that some of these guys have played for both sides and keep flipping between the two whenever it suits them. So it's important to sort of follow a through line if you can. And it's not easy. I think that all you can do is you can judge a man by his deeds. So until the deeds have happened, we won't be able to judge the man, will we? So when you look at a presidency, I'm afraid that's what we're left with. I think at this point, it doesn't matter if he's a womanizer. Sometimes he acts kind of crazy, but actually to me, he acts more human and more realistically that, I believe these other people that have been in office, people that are supposedly respected, are probably way crazier than Trump ever dreamed of being. It's just my view. I think that the image is an illusion. It's like many of these pedophiles are highly respected members of society, like Jimmy Savile in Britain. And there's so many of them that, in essence, these people were respected. They were supposed to be good guys, or whatever you want to call it, stars, respected people. And in fact, they were the complete opposite of the way they appeared. So I think it's a learning experience for humans to try to decipher what is the plot. That's something I talk about in my lectures. I ask the question, when you're here on Earth, you need to say, what is the plot? You're part of a grand play, as Shakespeare would say, right? So you need to find out what's your role, what is the plot, what is the storyline, what is the supposed storyline, and what's the emperor's new clothes, you know, and so some of the people
Follow your
that are,
intuition.
yeah, absolutely, and your own inner sort of knowing, and then, you know, do a
Inner
lot of
force.
research,
Right.
educate yourself. It doesn't matter when somebody is loved or hated. This too is an illusion. You know, some of the most horrible people have been supposedly loved by going by popularity. But even that may be a grand illusion. You know, in other words, do we really know how many people really hate Trump, and what do they hate him for exactly? And even if you were to take votes, a ballot box, and find out how many people supposedly are going to vote that they hate Trump, the ballots would be faked. It would be infiltrated.
Right.
Our voting process has been infiltrated.
What is real, what
forever.
is not. Yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter. It's just nonsense, you know.
Right.
Try to judge a person by their deeds, and let's see what happens. That's what matters.
Now on to a very important topic that you've talked a lot about, interviewed a lot of people about. Alien races. How many alien races do you know of? Or have you heard about, or do you know exist? Please tell us about that.
I have to say that one of the things that went into mainstream science, has made popular recently, has been that there are, if I remember the numbers correctly, it's something like billions of Earth-like planets that scientists have now found out in other galaxies beyond ours, including ours. May even be in our galaxy. I forget the exact quote. What does that mean? That means that as far as alien races, the possibility that those Earth-like planets, some portion of them contain life, and that some portion of that life growing up on a planet that is similar, you know, to ours, means, in essence, we're talking about races of humanoids. So then you have to gel down billions to, I don't know, hundreds of millions or thousands, whatever you want to do. In other words, it's ludicrous to think about how many aliens or other beings are there. I always say to people, you know, why do you want to limit the imagination of God? I don't see God as a person. I see the creator, what is endlessly creative. Why not every form of life you can ever imagine being alive
Say there's
somewhere?
an infinite number. How many do you know of, or have you spoken to people about how many?
Look, I've had
accounts
alien interaction. I've seen. I mean, even before Camelot, one very sort of striking experience I had was, I was sleeping, or thought I was sleeping, whatever you call sleeping, which I think people don't understand. But nonetheless, I was in some state, and there was a little old man sitting by my bed talking to me all night long. And we were having a discussion. I have no idea about what. I started to come into consciousness, and right at the last minute, I turned to him and said, "Wait a minute, what planet are you from?" Because I finally, you know, I was lucid dreaming at that point, thinking, damn it, this time I'm going to ask. It was the kind of thing where I'd talked to lots of aliens, and this was one alien I was going to frickin' ask, "Where are you from?" And he said Andromeda, and I woke up. So years later, I came across Alex Collier and his interaction with a small, bald head old man who was very instrumental in his information about these Andromedans. And that was what you call a coincidence. Or maybe not. Maybe it was a synchronicity. Maybe it was the same frickin' old man. I don't know. All I know is that when he told me he was from Andromeda, I woke up thinking, damn it, you know, here I finally remember meeting an alien, and he just looks like a little old man. I was so disappointed that he wasn't more exotic looking, you know. I don't know.
Took another form?
I have no idea. All I know is that this was my reaction. So you're asking me what aliens I am. I know that I was abducted by Greys when I was a young child. I do have typical abduction sort of memories. I also have an intuitive awareness of Grey alien bases and where they are.
Are the Greys hybrids, clones?
There are many different kinds of Greys, so let's first say that. So there are Grey beings that are descended from the reptilians line, okay? And there are biological programmable entities that have been created not only by our government, but by other alien races, in a sense, artificial intelligent little creature beings. There are lots and lots of different kinds of rays. What's hidden on planet Earth and why ISIS is destroying a lot of the monuments in the Middle East is because the history of the dominance of reptilians over humans is inscribed on those temples. And they don't want to reveal this information. It's all over Turkey, and I've been, told by researchers this is the case. It's all over Sardinia. It's all over the Earth in various places. Evidence that reptilians were in charge or in dominating human beings at some sector in our past, here on planet Earth, as well as in other galaxies, because the reptilians are a marauding species that go around taking over other planets because they are based on a hierarchical power system, and they are all about feeding on other beings, and they follow a dark path. Now, not all reptilians are still on a dark path, so it's important to say there are many species of reptilians, and apparently, according to one of my witnesses, Mark Richards, the raptors, who are descendant from the dinosaurs, etc., they have evolved to a place where they're now helping our military. They're no longer eating and feeding off humans. The mantid beings, according to Simon Parkes, a British counselor who was...
Praying mantis looking beings.
Praying mantis looking beings.
Okay.
Used to feed on humans every bit as viciously as the reptilians, but now have started to turn towards a positive, more ascension, what is called an ascension pathway. This is according to Simon Parkes, who considers himself descended from, in large part, not only being human, but also being a large part of mantis DNA. There are Pleiadians. I have reason to believe I'm related to at least a portion of the Pleiadians.
Nordics?
There are many different races of Nordics. Pleiadians are one. So, there are those kinds of beings. There are many different kinds of, there are insectoid beings. There are, ant-like beings. There's many...
who are highly involved, is that it?
No, not necessarily highly involved. In fact, if they're as high as 4D, they are actually pretty low-level life forms. They don't really occupy the higher dimensions in a spiritual sense. But I can say that I think my theory at this point is that look at every creature that is on the earth. Every single creature is a miniature, often a miniature, but sometimes, larger, like a big cat, is a reflection of an alien race. And that they were planted here as part of this huge genome that is called this human experiment, that we then came to inhabit these bodies. So your cat is descended from the cat beings. Your dog is descended from the dog beings. A butterfly is descended from whatever kind of worm or whatever kind of being that is. In other words, I think that the aliens that create this terraform an Earth, create an Earth-like place for a species such as a human to come in and experience, and all these other life forms. They actually create the life forms. We are a humanoid life form. Right? We are a composite being.
Are we a hybrid?
Absolutely. And that's why we have the reptilian mind. I think that there are at least 12 sort of substantial alien races that contributed to creating this body-mind complex that we call a human. It's a vehicle. We're spirit first. And you must understand the war with the reptilians is one that the Pleiadians have been involved in for eons, that they want humans to continue to fight that enemy of theirs, to help them in their fight, in their battle, to take back their lands in the solar systems, and so on.
So a lot of people are talking about reptilians being part of the overlords that control our governments.
Sure.
True or not?
Absolutely, yes. The reptilian, Anunnaki were also, their race was infiltrated. They're a humanoid race, in my view, that then were infiltrated by the reptilians, and then you get what is called, I believe, the Syrian Anunnaki, which are reptilian, more reptilian than human.
Okay.
But most of the real sort of original bloodline of the Anunnaki is not reptilian, it's a humanoid. And so what you get is we have a lot of Anunnaki that are still here influencing our governments. We have Syrian Anunnaki, which are reptilian Anunnaki that are certainly vying for control. You know, we have a lot of factions out there vying for control over this human experiment. But the reptilians are one of our primary enemies, if you will.
And the Illuminati know about that? Or part of it?
They're descended from them. They have, some of them have the widest, the largest amount of reptilian DNA. This is why, again, they're in positions of dominance.
So can they shapeshift, as David
Sure.
Icke and other people say?
Absolutely.
Real?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I don't think shape-shifting or leaving your body and coming back or occupying another body, this sort of thing, I mean, humans are capable of this as well. So this is not such a unique skill.
What is the best evidence we have for ordinary people who hear this for the first time, maybe, with this like outrageous, wild claims and something from a sci-fi film? So if we just talk to some people who are hearing this for the first time, let's say, and not been researching this for years.
Okay, one thing I can say is my own experience, okay? When I grew up, I believed that there were all kinds of beings and you know, other dimensions, etc. I had a very open mind to all of this. I did a tremendous amount of reading when I was a kid. I had a huge imagination, but this is what I believed. Now, when I reached the age, I was somewhere in my, I don't know, 20s, 30s, whatever it was. There had been a movie called V. It's the original V, not the more recent V, but the very original television
Yes,
series.
from the 80s, right?
And I thought that was a lie. I thought they made that up, that there would be reptilian beings, because of all the beings, I didn't believe that reptilians were real at that age. And then what happened was, and this was not long before Camelot, but it was a few years before, I went into a meditation and I was wide awake. I was sitting, you know, cross-legged on my bed at the time. And I somehow tripped into interdimensional reality. And I wasn't asleep, but I wasn't completely in that meditational state, whatever that is, depending on, you know, theta, beta, all this kind of thing. So basically what happened was I saw a flying reptilian, which I didn't even know existed, with scales and the whole thing, which is called a shikar, a winged dragon, which is a reptilian. Go by me, and I knew it was a consciousness, and I knew he saw me. He wanted me to see him, and I snapped in that, you know, couple seconds back into this reality, and I realized I didn't forget what I'd seen, which usually you do, but I didn't, and I realized that indeed that was a reptilian, and that reptilian wanted me to know that he was very real. And from then on, I knew without a doubt reptilians are real. So I didn't need David Icke to tell me reptilians were real, because this happened long before David Icke.
Have they seen
Sure.
them with their own eyes?
David Icke has seen them.
He has seen them?
And so have I. And I'm not going to elaborate. I know certain people that are very much involved with being reptilian. And
With
I
being
can say, yeah.
reptilian.
In other words, that they have a high degree of reptilian DNA, that they can shapeshift. Some of them are occupied by reptilians that come and go. You know, this kind of thing. This is what's going on in our reality.
Wow. And you don't want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I'm not going to name names if that's what you'd ask.
No, that's fine. But if you
I've also had many witnesses that have talked about reptilians, and I've also had other encounters with reptilians in my own, you know, sort of in my dream life in a very graphic way, but also in discussions with other people. I have an interview with Melinda Leslie, for example. She talks in depth about their dealings with a reptilian. I can say that there are other people that have dealt with reptilians that have given me their stories. The truth will happen to you. And so it doesn't matter what I say. It really doesn't. All you can do is use your own experiences use your own intuition to go through life. And eventually, the things that I'm saying to you, I would basically say are basically true, and you will find them for yourself. By the way, the Hopi race, I have
the Indians,
members of the Hopi who have told me that the Hopi god is a reptilian.
Really?
The one who they supposedly worship. And that this is not a nice reptilian, but actually vindictive reptilian. So I'm not saying all Hopi worship this particular being, but I can tell you that Hopi has told me this, and I believe him, absolutely.
Oh, very interesting. How is the planet Saturn involved in all of this, humanity, our dimension, and those alien races?
I interviewed a man called Norm Bergram, another very important Camelot witness, who I urge everyone to watch my interview. He disappeared not long after I interviewed him.
Disappeared?
Yes. He believed at the time I interviewed him that he was an older man. I think it was 83 or 85 when I interviewed him. He was smart as a whip. He had worked in black projects underground in Moffett Field in Northern California in Palo Alto for most of his career, well over 30 years. And he was a very, a scientist who was still very much alive and vibrant at his old age. And he talked about, he wrote a book called The Ringmakers of Saturn. And John Lear is the one who told us about him. And he had met him and talked with him. And
you did a great interview with him, yeah.
Yeah, he believed that the beings in Saturn that created the rings are being created by the ships that are in those rings, that they create the rings somehow.
In order to do what?
I have no idea. I'm just telling you his theory. And Saturn does appear to have a rule over Earth on some level. Whether it comes from the past, it certainly comes from the past, but whether it's as potent now as it was in the past, I don't know. There are many unanswered questions regarding Saturn and the relationship between Earth and Saturn.
Yeah, some people say it's projecting our reality from the
I mean,
rings.
Saturn, Satan, these things all go together when you start studying the symbolism. If you study the work of Jordan Maxwell and certainly the information that he got from oh God, what's his name? Anyway, I can't remember. All I can say, it's in the symbolism. So Saturn is associated with time in astrology. Again, time would be a kind of a taskmaster. Saturn is often in astrology the
Grim Reaper.
Yeah, the planet in which you are paid. You are actually paid for your sins, but you're also getting honors if you've supposedly done well. So there is some kind of ruler relationship, I'd say, with humanity and the beings of Saturn. It's quite possible that these are not positively oriented beings.
And is that connected to the moon? What is going on in the moon? We have a picture here of the moon landing. Was that real or not? Can you say?
Well, what I would say is, based on all my research and all of the information I've gotten from all the witnesses I've talked to in depth, I would say we did go to the moon, but we had help, as one of my witnesses has said many times. And that, in fact, Jay Widener, I think, has written a book, I don't know if he's released it yet, about how Stanley Kubrick basically was part of the sort of fake moon landing scenario, and that he did a service to the secret space program.
So Kubrick directed the moon landing that we saw in 1969.
Absolutely, or made films of it. Yes, made a film that was supposed to substitute for what really went on.
So what we saw was not real.
Right.
But something real happened.
Yes.
Right.
And William Tompkins, another very important witness who died recently.
That you have interviewed.
I interviewed.
Very good.
He actually fills in those gaps. He makes it clear how that trajectory happened, how we were helped. He actually was part of that effort to, and he talks about, the astronauts seeing reptilians on the moon, etc.
Really?
Telling them to leave. Yes. So fascinating stuff. But yeah, absolutely. There's a long story involved there. What I wanted to say was that I guess Stanley Kubrick, according to Jay Weidner, he says that he thinks he actually is not dead, that he may have actually been given sort of a second lease on life and may be living in the Mars colonies that we have.
The Mars colonies, can you just talk a little bit about that?
There is lots of information about colonies and underground bases that we have on the Moon and Mars, absolutely. We're also terraforming other planets, such as the moons of Saturn and Jupiter, according to my witnesses.
There is a moon on one of Saturn's moons that look like the Death Star in Star Wars.
George Lucas and Steven Spielberg are what we call read in.
What does that mean?
Some artists, like Arthur C. Clarke, have been given knowledge. They've had to sign a non-disclosure agreement, but their work involves the information they have been given as part of the disclosure program.
Do we know that?
I know it. I can tell you that all the evidence that I have substantiates the statement I just made.
Okay. That's why that in Star Wars, who was made in the 70s,
yes,
could be
he knows what he's doing.
Dark side, light side,
absolutely,
evil empire and rebellion.
Very accurate stuff. But you have to also realize that artists base their work on other artists' work. So there are precedents for some of what Lucas was talking about out there in the literature, even before he created his screenplay. But there's no doubt he was, probably helped, as was Spielberg, and with Close Encounters, etc.
It's very fascinating. Yeah. So when people hear all of this and all of these incredible things, and they can really research for years, what is your best advice for them to do when they hear this? Because a lot of people can be very filled up with fear and go maybe into a very dark and be very sad about all of this. What is your best advice for people to do?
Well, I don't know why people wouldn't want to embrace the sort of miraculousness of all of this, because it is far more than people are led to believe. They weren't born to work an 8-hour-a-day job, come home, drink beer on the couch and watch TV, and then go to sleep and start all over the next day. There's much more to this than that. And what I'm doing is kind of, through my explorations and through my talking to people who have had, in many cases, direct experiences, and also my own direct experiences, what I'm doing is sharing the wealth of information and knowledge that's out there. If you want to find it, it's out there, as the X-Files says, and the truth is out there. It's all here, and it's much more miraculous. It's much more complex. It's much, there's no reason to dwell in a world of limitation and reductionism and thinking, you're born to be hit on the head over and over again and to be a slave and all of this. What's the point of that kind of thought process? Isn't it much more exciting to realize that the Creator, however you envision that, the Force, is endlessly creating? And so there is no limits. That's what's miraculous about this thing we call life, is how unlimited it truly is. And I think embracing the possibilities, whether you want to believe in them completely, doesn't matter. They don't need your belief, okay? The Creator doesn't need your belief, nor does he or she or whatever it need your worship. This is an illusion. It's fine. It doesn't care whether you worship it. It's absolutely immaterial. It might matter to you. You might feel better if you do it. Maybe that's reason enough to do it. But, I think people are just sort of reside in a lot of stupidity. I think they accept things that they're told by other people because they've been told to accept the voice of authority. I don't accept the voice of authority on anything except my own.
So no fear.
I think, I'm afraid I can't pay my rent next month. That's my fear. That's a very practical fear. I hope I'll make enough money by doing this crazy job I do to pay my rent. would I be stupid? Am I stupid to fear? Should I just get rid of that? I think I should. But you know what? It's a very basic human instinct to wonder if, you know, if I'm going to eat tomorrow, if I'm going to go around a corner, a dark corner, and be, you know, kidnapped or killed, or, you know, I'm not stupid. If you're intelligent, I think you understand fear. Fear is what can warn you before something happens. If you get some kind of stimulus that actually makes you realize that it's sort of that instinct to stay, I want to stay in this reality, in this body. That's probably really the definition of fear. If you don't care, if you stay in this reality, in this body, then you have no fear. Zero. Period. And in reality, that's where we all should be. I mean, the reason I did Camelot, I knew that there was danger. I don't care. I mean, call me courageous if you want, but I'm not stupid. I know it's dangerous. That scares me, but at the same time, I don't care about the fear. I go beyond it. I realize that this life, living this life has no meaning for me if I can't move beyond the fear and do what I want anyway.
So you
I don't care if I die.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, you know, the only way to live. And, you know, I'm not going to stop doing that. It served me well in my life. And so I highly recommend it. I think, you know, living beyond the fear, living with courage is the best way to live. It's, in essence, it's the best revenge.
You certainly have been brave, and you are brave and very courageous, and you've done some incredible work that I think will live on for a long time. And I want to say that we are very happy to have done this interview with you, and thank you for being on Age of Truth TV. Kerry Cassidy, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.